If you're listening to this, it's estimated you'll spend roughly 90,000 hours working in your lifetime. That's 1/3 of your entire life. If you're anything like me, you've probably asked, what am I working for? Maybe you've thought about quitting your job, changing careers, altering your relationship to work, or trying not to let your work rule your life. And if that's the case, this series is for you. Hey, it's Chad here, host of a Level Deeper podcast, and welcome back to my mini-series, What Are We Working For? So in part one, we talked with coaches Gina Murata and Mitchell Martin about our relationship to work and how come so many people struggle with the role that they want their work to play in their lives. Today, in part two, we're going to explore some common advice that's given around finding meaningful work, which is to follow your passion. You know, from my perspective, this is a difficult one for me. Every time I find myself enjoying some activity or hobby or something I'm passionate about, I find myself naturally thinking, well, if I do this for free and I enjoy it, wouldn't it be great to turn it into my career? What if I could make money doing something that I love? I mean, isn't that the dream? That question and thought process is what this episode is dedicated to exploring. So to do that, I'm excited to share a couple of conversations I had with everyday people who share their experiences on both sides of this equation. Up first, I spoke with Alyssa, who is a professional in her 30s, and after a couple of career changes, has found herself following a career path that has been unexpected in the best possible way. Here's my conversation with Alyssa. So one of the things, Alyssa, you mentioned to me was you had said that you had kind of proved yourself wrong about your career path, or at least what you wanted it to be. So let's start there. Tell me about what was kind of your first vision for what you thought your career path was or what you wanted it to be.
Sure. So I don't even know when the movie was created. Let's say it was like early 2000s, but Devil Wears Prada is what I was like deeply inspired by, not necessarily for like it focusing on fashion, but it was more so around this journalist trying to make a name for herself in New York City. And she just started as like basically an entry level like admin at this fashion company in editing, and she supported like the main editor in chief of the company. And I was just like, ooh, not that I wanted to do that specific role, but just like the hustle and bustle and of like city life, but also like the hustle and grind of work. Like for some reason it was like appealing, or maybe just back then I was like, oh, that's what it's supposed to be like. And if that's what it's supposed to be like, then how am I going to get myself to kind of fit in that mentality, to fit within that work ethic? And how do I just start to practice that? So I more so wanted to be in journalism once I started out in college. And then over time, it turned into, no, I want to be in advertising and marketing. Didn't really want to be boots on the ground, interviewing or gathering stories like that. Just wasn't my cup of tea, as I learned like through different classes. So I switched my focus to marketing and advertising, and more so in project management. And so further down the line in college, I landed an internship with an ad agency. And again, it came back to that like very much kind of chaotic, stressful environment that for some reason I wanted to be a part of, and just kind of be like that quote unquote like boss bitch, and like really prove myself and just try and do all the things to kind of be like recognized for really just like someone who had their stuff together, had a good head on their shoulders, was diligent in how they work, and just really had a good and strong work ethic. And so as I graduated college, I went back to the advertising agency that I had an internship with. And the way in which I proved myself wrong was like, I got maybe less than a year into my very first big girl job. And I was like, oh my God, no, this is so wrong. This is like, I could just feel this underlying fear of like, this is really not where I'm supposed to be. And something just felt off. And the hustle and bustle wasn't really what it was all cracked up to be. And I wouldn't even say like I really fell into a role that was like super intense. There were intense moments or periods of time, but it wasn't what I had envisioned. So I just found myself like, I'm kind of bored. I'm not super passionate about helping build websites for an automotive company. Like there has to be more to my work life. If this normal 9 to 5 kind of time frame of work is what I'm falling into, like I gotta find more value in it than this for it to be sufficient and fulfilling for me.
Are you able to identify like when you had this Devil Wears Prada type, vision, and you wanted to be maybe in the city, and the type of role that you would have and the atmosphere that you would be in, are you able to identify what was behind, like what about that appealed to you, or what about what that would give you or bring to you was interesting?
I think, I guess, comparing it to the movie itself, like just seeing the depiction of a young woman trying to make a name for herself. Yes, she was in the movie, like seeing her boyfriend, and she had a close group of friends, but she was really focused on her career and really driven in that and trying to accomplish that. And I think that was something I attached myself to. Like it wasn't necessarily being in New York City or being in fashion. It was like, how can I approach my career in a similar way? And just how can I navigate that? Maybe with the place not being the same thing or my external circumstances looking differently, but what can I do here in Michigan to kind of walk a similar path, but still a path that's my own, not some maybe like magical fairy tale movie type of path that, we all know is pretty unrealistic. So what would make sense for me?
So while you were pursuing some of these early jobs in marketing and advertising and journalism, I mean, was there an area of, sort of a hobby or passion that was kind of itching at you, that you were thinking like, were you wondering what it might be like to work in some other different kind of environment? And then what did that transition end up looking like?
Yeah, so at when I was in my actually before I landed my first job out of college, slightly before that, I was volunteering a lot with a local nonprofit in Michigan and kind of serendipitously stumbled upon them at a college networking event, met with the executive director. I'm like, sign me up to volunteer. I want to know, like, how can I help? How can I be of service and support for you all? So as that was going, I was like dipping my toes into volunteer work, kind of that nonprofit social impact space, but not really thinking about, oh, could this be a career path? It was just, what more could I be doing? And I really saw myself like aligning with the mission. Now, maybe a year and a half or so after that, when I was in my first job, I was still very much involved with this nonprofit. And as I saw myself kind of detaching from my actual job, I was noticing my energy and focus in like downtime, emailing the executive director, how can I help? What events are going on? Where can I be? Where can I volunteer? Like I was kind of doing both things a little like kind of like simultaneously. And once I got to that aha moment of like, okay, where am I like if I am bored in this job, where am I actually spending time? Where am I finding value? What am I like really strongly believing in? And at the time, it was this nonprofit. I was still very much using like the same skills that I was applying in my job. I was in project management, love, love that area of work. Um, so it was starting to think about, okay, how can I take like what I'm doing in my job right now, that skill set, and how can I maybe apply it elsewhere? Instead of volunteering, could I volunteer actually like in a different way where I'm providing like my skill set, my services to the nonprofit? And so that's kind of what it turned into. I started doing some like organizational kind of stuff, like just getting things organized, like an Excel spreadsheet, like very bare bones, nothing super technical. Um, but that's just kind of, I followed that interest, I followed that path, and eventually it led to, as I was in a job search for a different advertising and marketing role, I also got a call from the nonprofit to say, hey, we have this like opening that kind of sort of fits everything that you do and that you're interested in. Like, would you want to interview and would you want to apply? I'm like, absolutely, yes. So, and then I ended up taking that job with the nonprofit and switching everything, skill set staying the same, but just going in a different industry, so to speak.
So was there any sort of change? Like you had recognized, okay, outside of my normal 9 to 5, I enjoy investing time into and volunteering for this nonprofit. And then that transitioned into a formal job where you're working for this nonprofit. Did anything change in just the relationship, between it being something where you're just volunteering, you're giving your time and you enjoy it, and then it becomes your job that you're showing up to and reporting to every day? Did anything change with just your relationship with the nonprofit, with how you felt about the work itself? I'm always curious about when we actually go pursue things that we just do for fun or because they're meaningful, and then we turn them into work where we now make income. Does it shift the relationship?
I think it does, or it can. It has the ability. I think that with a nonprofit, though, like especially if you have a really strong connection to the mission and you in a way like lead with your heart, like I think if you have a strong compelling why as to like why you want to support that specific nonprofit, whether that's volunteering or a formal job, that stretches you farther, I think. And it's not, new news, but for small nonprofits, you're taking a pay cut, you're sacrificing income, and at the same time, you're very much in it for the mission, or at least I'm hoping that most people are. Um, and so I think because not I think, I know that because I strongly believed in the mission of what we did as an organization, that allowed me to stay in it so much longer than I anticipated. I gave, this was a conversation I was having with my parents, like, oh my gosh, like, do I sacrifice, I don't like, probably it was like close to like $10,000, like that I was making through salary that then was taken away from a pay cut. Do I sacrifice goals about like moving out and just saving and trying to take that next step in adulthood? And it was those kinds of conversations. And at the time, I was fortunate enough with my parents, like they weren't asking me to pay rent. They were supportive and like, if this is something you're really passionate about, now is the time to do it. versus maybe later down the line, if you have other responsibilities, you might just not have the bandwidth or the financial stability to make that move. But all that being said, I stayed in that position a lot longer than I had told myself I was going to be. I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself maybe a year, 2 years max. And if I'm not maybe back at like the same salary that I was starting at this ad agency, then I maybe need to reconsider. And every time I came back to that conversation, whether it was with my parents or just with myself internally, figuring out like, okay, is now the time to make a leap or make a change? I kept going back to no, like my heart was still very much in the job and in the mission. And that's what kept me there, not the finances or any, like the financial components of it. It was really the mission of the nonprofit and honestly, like the people, the volunteers I got to meet, the people that I worked with, as many times as it was like stressful and, you know, we're doing a million and one things with very limited resources, the people were also a key component of what kept me in it too.
You talk about some of the sacrifices around pay, around maybe, you know, goals, around this like traditional mile markers of success.
Mm-hmm.
What was the hardest part for you in making some of these sacrifices? Was there something that you found you internally struggled with the most?
Honestly, I think this might be like the first time I've ever been asked that question. And I don't think I ever felt like I really struggled with it where like that was the determining factor of why I decided to leave, because it wasn't. I left for very different reasons. And I mean, finances were a little bit of it, but it was not the main driving force. And I think that just goes to show that, like, if you are following something that is your passion or something that you are just so personally invested in, that some of those other mile markers, or like how you said it was like maybe the societal norms or mile markers of success, like those kind of just float to the back of your mind. Yeah, they creep in every now and then, but I don't I don't think it really bothered me that I felt behind, because I didn't. I felt like I was right where I was supposed to be. I was moving at a pace that I wanted to. I was doing something that I really enjoyed and I was learning a lot. So like all of those things outweighed those mile markers of success. That was my version of success. Was I happy? Was I finding value? Was my heart in it? Was my head in it most of the time? Yes, sometimes not, but we all like cross that too. But yeah, can't really say that those things steered me away from it.
So, are those the things that continue to kind of inform how you make decisions about your work in your career today? You're still building a career in the social impact space. How are you going about evaluating your work and your career, and if it's what you want to continue doing?
So, yeah, I would still say those drivers of success for me are still what I lead by. Um, I would also add that like my external circumstances are different now. I live with my boyfriend, I'm not with my parents, so I do, you know, help pay for utilities, pay a form of rent, and like, so with those things at play, yeah, your decisions and choices may need to shift at certain points more than others. But I think that for me, I know that like I want to remain in the social impact space. Where I've landed now is basically a community foundation or fund. So you take a big corporation, they typically have a philanthropic arm of their business. I'm within that arm of the company that I'm at now, and I am a program manager who basically helps create all of the volunteer programming for some of our markets that we work within. So is it similar to the role that I was previously in with the nonprofit partner or nonprofit organization? Not entirely. And at the same time, there are still elements of like, okay, my first step into social impact was being a volunteer. So having that personal experience and now being in a role where I can invite our team members into that same experience, hoping that they find something that they're passionate about, that's fulfilling too. It looks so different, but in some ways, it's the same. Like it's the same in that it gives me that same amount of fulfillment. So I think really I've done I feel comfortable and I feel solid in like my decision making to get to a certain point where I'm like, okay, I know that when I'm going through career changes or choices, I am leading with like, is this fulfilling? Am I finding value? Do I feel like I'm growing in my skill set? Are the people around me on my team or maybe an indirect team, are they helping me grow? Are they also like healthy for me? That's a big thing. And there might be some other questions in there too. And then the finances, the benefits, those kinds of things fall a little bit down the line. But again, those may shift farther up depending on what my life looks like and what I need to prioritize.
So as you look back on the decision when you were a year or so into this marketing and advertising career, you're thinking about making a pivot, you're talking this over with your family and internally and maybe with, other people in your life, the weight of that can feel like so much, the weight of that decision. If someone is going through that same sort of process, they're debating the same sorts of things that you were debating at that time, they're wanting to make maybe a similar type of switch, is there advice that you would have or perspective that you might share with that person?
Yes. My piece of advice that, if you are kind of going through this back and forth of should I make this decision? Should I change my career path or not? Or whatever the case may be within your career. If there is a whisper to do it, follow it. And I'm not necessarily saying like follow it and make that leap, but follow it enough that you are considering all the possibilities. If you think it's so far-fetched for you to go, like for me to go from a quote unquote secure advertising marketing job to maybe one that's a little less secure in the nonprofit space, sit down and actually put it to paper. What are the pros and cons? Look at your finances closely. Could you budget and make it happen? And if you could, for how long? Like really follow yourself down the rabbit hole. And if you get to a point where it's like, I could probably make this happen and I would feel comfortable in doing so, I feel like that's a key indicator to go for it. And two, if it keeps coming up, like if you say, oh, I'm thinking about this, and then you're like, not the right time, you brush it off, but maybe a few months later, there's another sign or there's another whisper. You should probably pursue that. And I think as cliche as it maybe is, like, yeah, life is kind of too short. It really is. It's too short to like not explore something, especially if you just continue to sit with it, if you continue to think about it, you continue to think about like, oh, what could my life like if I were to do this? And sometimes, yeah, it maybe isn't about following the rabbit hole of that thinking. And sometimes maybe it is just ripping the band-aid and just going for it and completely failing, but at least you would know. You would know that it wasn't the right fit, it wasn't the right time, or whatever the case may be, but in the end you tried.
I love that. I love that advice and perspective. Thank you for joining me on the show. Thank you for being willing to share some of your story and your experiences. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Happy to be here.
So, what about the other side of things? I mean, does it always work out this way when we try to turn something we love or are passionate about into our work or our career? My second conversation I'm excited to share with you is with Aaron, a welder in his mid-30s who followed his passion for metal art and creating sculptures and had some different experiences. Aaron, the thing that I was interested in talking to you about, we had chatted a little bit on a Facebook post, and you had shared some thoughts about work. And one in particular, a statement that you had made was, but at some point, for some of us, the passion and hobby should be separate from the career and job. I guess I want to dive into that with you and understand what led to that belief for you and some of your journey with work and hobbies and passions. So I guess, take us back to what led to that belief. Tell us some of that story.
Well, so what happened for me is I created my own double-edged sword. Is that my calling is fabrication, metalwork, stuff of that nature, making stuff. That's what my full-time job. So then my hobby also involved making stuff, So it's all kind of the same thing. It's not like I picked up crochet or I'm a big card player. I'm not one end to the other. Both things revolve around welding, essentially. So I wasn't able to escape, from that environment, but I love that environment. So I had created my own kind of happy place in that environment in my garage when I was making these artistic, real big pieces. Some of them were over 7 feet tall, a couple 100 pounds. There was hours and hours and hours worth of just labor, welding, drilling, shaping, cut, So if I go to work for 10 hours a day and then I come home and I do that for another 5 or 6, there's no in between. It all blurred together, So if you have a frustrating day at the shop at work and then you come home to the same, you also have to put a grinder and a stinger in your, So I had pretty much done that to myself. So, but that being said, I was still creating the escape, the great getaway. I was able to tune out the world, but I wasn't able. So for me to make money as an artist, because I was creating product, I was creating things to sell. So you're constantly trying to create something new, something different, something, because if the last thing didn't sell, you got to get something else. It was like I said, I've done it to myself, the old double-edged sword. I created a lose-lose situation. But for other people I've seen is that, well, my situation and other people's, it does just become work. Even like I said, if you're big into crocheting, like how many hours a day do you want to crochet something? Before long, it's going to all blur together. And you're not going to have the escape. You're not going to have the happy place, So when you turn your passion into business, that's where the good and evil. That's where the good became evil, essentially. When money became dependent on the money. I never went out on my own because I knew I wasn't I couldn't make it. Well, So long story short, if I were to invest 10 hours into something and take it to a craft show and sell it for $120, so for 10 hours worth of work, how much was I making an hour?
Not enough.
No. It's what is that? $12 an hour?
Yeah.
Good thing I didn't quit my day job. But so the math, the math wasn't there either for me to. But back to your passion becoming your job, you have to have that difference. Otherwise, it's all the same. There's no great escape. How do you find joy when it's work? Work isn't joy. I don't know, but that's my particular scenario where I was doing the same thing for work and the same thing for the hobby.
That's one of the things that I'm wanting to explore in this series is, you made the comment that work isn't joy. Kind of like those are two separate things.
Yeah.
I find myself wanting or expecting, and I don't know if this is the right expectation to have, but I still find myself wanting or expecting the things that I do for work to also bring joy, to have that be the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can say it's working out great, but I find myself consistently wanting that to be the case. Like if I have a hobby like this podcast, I apply this pressure of like, well, if I enjoy doing this podcast, then shouldn't I try to make money off of it? And wouldn't it be great if it could be part of, my career and what I do every day? Tell me more about some of this belief around, maybe a separation between work and joy, and that those two things might not necessarily go together in your mind.
Well, everyone's different, but I guess there can be joy in the work. You can love what you do. Now, I love what I do. Trust me, there's times where I am having a good time on the clock. But so that might fulfill one part of you. But when you're doing something for yourself, like what you do for your 40-hour-a-week job, not saying you don't enjoy it or anything like that, not saying it wouldn't bring you joy, but is it as much fun as this podcast? Are you, so that's what the metal art was for me, it was my little bit of fun. Well, maybe it's because I'm used to working in a shop, where it's a little bit more rough around the edges, where if it's hot outside that day, there's some days are better than others, definitely. I'm sure there's some days where you just want to rip your hair out, why did I pick this profession? But it's not, like I said, it's not going to fill your bucket. I'm not going to tell my kids about, the time. Well, maybe I will. I don't know, but I'm not going to have a smile on my face like when I tell them about the dinosaur I built over there, or or what have you. I don't know.
So have you kind of built, gone back to having your metal art be an escape? What has your relationship turned into with what was a hobby that meshed into your day-to-day job and your career? Those things got really blended at one point, and that kind of led you to believe, all right, maybe this isn't the best way of going about it. Have you been able to restore it as a hobby, as an escape? What's that like now?
Well, again, I am my own worst enemy in that whole arena. So I did make myself gun shy with when I did realize that I had to slow down. I took, and my yard was starting to fill up with these creations that weren't selling. That was another heartbreaker. So another thing with being a small business owner and a hobbyist and trying to market your hobby is that you will get heartbroken. That's hard. That's hard. Some people just plain old don't like what you're trying to peddle, which is fine. I like it. That's, so that was another eye opener. So that was probably back in 2019 when I kind of hung up the crazy mad scientist artistic thing I had going on, where I was just making these things and they weren't selling, because I seriously had about 8 or 10 of them in my backyard. And then, you know, so up at my parents' farm, I have about 5 or 6 of them that are just stashed around the farm. I don't remember the last time you've been up there. So I had to put that on hold, and I kind of picked up smoking meat. And this was before COVID. So COVID threw a wrench in the works. And as much time as I had off during COVID, I maybe made some handmade flowers, maybe made a dozen of those, but definitely not on the scale that I was. And like I said, I'd almost kind of blown myself out on it. I just, I'd kind of lost inspiration, kind of was in a lull, you know. But no, so over the years, I've kind of replaced it with other stuff. And obviously my daughter has taken up a large chunk of that now, to where it's just, I just come home, we'll go to work, come home, take care of her, and then bedtime. And that's about it. Yeah, and as she gets older, it'll get a lot better. We'll do stuff, but no, I just kind of had to put a stopper in it, because I could tell that like I said, I just had a yard full of them. So I can't keep doing this to myself. I'm tired of mowing the grass around them, I don't know. I just kind of, and I had a house full of it too. I had stuff that wasn't just for the yard. I had little things that go on the desk. I made 2 different coffee tables. I like I said, the mad scientist artistic thing took over for a few years, and I just, but in another person's case, to where if you were to, so there's other hobbies out there that won't take up large chunks of your life. Like you could totally get hooked on this podcast thing. Worst thing you could be is just annoying. you know what I'm saying? You're not gonna fill your property up, because what was happening to me is my friends were very supportive of my metal art. So they'd bring me stuff. I was getting buckets and buckets, and before you know it, I had half a garage full of just junk. And it was, I had to take a look around and weigh the options and be like, so what do I want? I'm not, it was a tough time. It was a tough time, because I literally had to stop myself and try something else.
And tell me more about, how did things change when you were creating metal art from a place of pure creativity and inspiration? I guess I'm assuming that's where it started. Like, you know what? I just want to create something. This is my,
like a lightning bolt hit me.
Yeah. So like, this is my skill set, and I want to create something. And then I'm making assumptions, so stop me at any point. But then I'm assuming maybe it was like, someone was like, oh, hey, I'm interested in buying that. Or maybe, can you make this for me? And all of a sudden it turns into, now you're creating things, maybe not just for the pure joy of creating, you're creating it with the end goal of selling it in mind.
Yeah. Yep.
How did that change some of your relationship to the creation and the creativity in the first place?
Well, some of it was discouraging. You get to know who some of your friends are once you come out with a service of this kind. So I had some friends expecting me to make them stuff, weld them stuff, for a 12-pack pizza dinner. When I should be charging per hour. Some of it was very discouraging. So it went from being inspiration to forcing it out. Sometimes someone would order something, and it would be a fun little job, if you find the right person. But then sometimes I was pushing them out just for a bit of profit. And again, that's not a bad thing. If you find something easy that you can make real, I had a nice little system on some of these things that I've made a bunch of, like the shovel bird that your mom has, that me and my dad made. So I was making a dozen of those a year. And I had, like I said, a system. It wasn't that bad. But some of these other things I've had to make or fix for my friends, and like you said, it's not for me. It's strictly for the money. And that's all well and good if that's your job. When it's your hobby, but like I said, some friendships got strained, because a lot of people expected this stuff for almost free. And And if you're going to try to support your friends in any way, pay full price, if not more. That's the way I see it. So I have a friend that takes care of my parents' house when they go to Florida. So I always make sure I pay him, top dollar, because he's doing it because he's my friend, otherwise, because he's got too much work as it is. But you know what I'm saying? You can count on your friends for some, but when it comes to their service, their thing, show your appreciation.
Yeah, I've thought about that way as well. When you've got it can be a difficult relationship, but ultimately it feels like the ideal scenario would be, well, if a friend is in business, then it's like, well, then them, the service provider well, so then wouldn't you trust them more? And so wouldn't you want to pay, full price and just know that, like, well, you're getting someone that you trust, you have a relationship with them, you're not hiring someone, sort of random. So I can appreciate that line of thinking. I'm curious, do you have any regrets? I mean, the fact that you did pursue the metal art and you maybe wanted to or tried to turn it into more of a business and try to make money off of it. Do you have any regrets?
Well, so there was a line that my dad's mentor had. So there was no such thing as a world famous welder. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of world famous singers and this and that, but there's. So in order for me to have made it, big, I would have had to have something exceptional. I would have needed a Discovery Channel show. There's people out there that have extremely impressive things that don't have anything more than a YouTube channel. And there's some really impressive stuff out there. But no, like, my biggest regret is that I went too hard. So the life-size dinosaur sculptures, they range from like 3 feet tall to 7.5 feet tall. I've probably made close to 20 different ones that were that big. And I can't tell you how many in between different smaller things. And none of it went past Facebook or my friend's front yard, But no, I wish I wouldn't have went so crazy. Wish I wouldn't have flooded my storage space with all this stuff. I was just, like I said, I was just struck with pure inspiration. I could see it. I could see him, right before me. All I had to do was build it. That was the way I saw it. So in a year and a half time, I built 20 different life-size sculptures, and I've only sold one for full price, and that was to one of my good friends I used to live with, and he's the only one that ever paid full price. I've sold a few on Marketplace, but I just put a price on it just to get rid of it. You know what I'm saying? But no, like I said, it's to have your passion judged and sold, and people not wanting to pay for it, and then, like I said, you got to have something exceptional to be world class. You know what I'm saying? And then what the hell do you do with and then you're really working,
Yeah.
And then it really ain't any fun. So no, the biggest regret is I wish I would have slowed down. I wish I was still doing it. I could have stretched those 20 dinosaurs out for the past 5 years, But no, I did them all in a year and a half, I don't know. Yeah, that's my biggest regret.
When you think about work right now in your life, and you think about the role that you want your work and your career to play in your life, the expectations that you have about your work, what do those look like right now?
Well, so I have my own business with the weld testing microscope, and then I have a mobile welding rig, and I'm working full time for another small business owner. He only employs about 6 people, and 2 of them are his kids. So I'm done working for the big corporations, but he's an older guy. So I'm going to say maybe 10 more years that he's going to want to be in the position he's in, and then maybe take a step back. So right now, I'm just kind of looking for my full-time job to just pay the insurance and just keep the bills at bay while I'm working on my side business and trying to build the business model I want for my day-to-day to consist of. Since I've had a bad experience, I'm looking for a good experience. I want to make sure I got my ducks in a row, and just kind of, like I said, build the job I want. Because honest to God, we're all at the helm. We can all pick whatever we want to do. We don't have to work for someone else, but you might have to for a little while in the meantime. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't. That's not the end game. Working for someone else isn't the end game. But no. So, like I said, I'm just for the full-time job. Just keep my bills paid while I'm working on me, and then whenever I feel like this bird's ready to fly is when when I feel like I got enough ground to stand on. Maybe I'll go on my own, or maybe I'll take over for the guy I work for now. I don't know. Right now, I'm just kind of in limbo. Like I said, got another kid on the way. Kids are number one priority right now. Like I said, job's just paying the bills. As long as the lights don't go out, I'm good.
Do you have advice that you would share? If someone's listening to this and let's just say that they're, for whatever reason, not satisfied with their current work, they're exploring what their options might be, and they're thinking about taking a hobby or a passion and trying to turn that into a career. Do you have advice that you would share with that person?
Well, so if you're looking for a new career, don't be afraid to try something new, completely different. So well, I wasn't expecting to get into this weld testing stuff until I met my current employer, and he threw me into it. So it was baptism under fire, and I came out. I'm good. So that was so that so the position I hold now pays more. Because I've had on the job training now for over a year doing this particular thing. Like, all you gotta do is just try. If you fail, just keep trying. Try something new and keep trying. But if you're looking to turn your passion into your moneymaker or your full-time gig, is map it out. Write down what you want to see happen, what you want to get out of this. Write down what you want to keep sight of, and just write everything down that you expect out of this whole endeavor, and then weigh your options. Do the math. Am I going to have to sell my soul to this to make it work? Or you got to just make sure you do the math and get ready for a little bit of heartbreak, because it's going to happen. Especially if you're passionate about it. If this is what you want to do, this is what you love. It's going to hurt at some point. Guaranteed you're going to have it. But yeah, if you like I said, write it all down, because I wish I was better prepared for what I was trying to do. Because like I said, years ago when I was crazy, I was just shooting in the dark. Now that I have some clarity, I can see all my missteps, and I should have stopped, looked around, wrote it down. Like I said, what you expect, what do you want out of this? Because guaranteed something's going to disappear. You're going to have to give something up. You're going to have to change, and you better be ready. You don't want any surprises. Another thing was when I started my own business was taxes at the end of the year. I'm not money is evil, this and that, but not to just emphasize on nothing but monetary gain or loss. But money does play a part. You can't lose the house because you're following your poker playing dream or your crocheting blanket dream or your metal art dream. You can't be living in the cold because you're out doing what you want. So yeah, that's the advice. Yeah, try something new, because if you're not happy with what you're doing, it ain't working. But yeah, that's what I wish I would have known.
I think it's good advice. And obviously it comes from experience. So thank you for thank you for being willing to share some of your story and perspective. I appreciate it. I think someone who might be weighing some of the same things that we are weighing and that we are talking about will find it helpful and insightful. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be negative or anything. I was just trying to be real. These are the things. You know, like I said, there will be loss, gain, heartbreak, all that. You know, just be ready.
Well, my friend, as we reflect on these two conversations, I'll share a small anecdote related to the show as well. In the beginning of this podcast, my goal was to turn this into something that created income for me. I wanted it to be my job, my career, or at least part of it. I mean, as I got going, I was enjoying it, and I liked connecting with people, so why not get paid to do it? What I found was that along with the expectations that this show needed to make money came a lot of pressure. Pressure to get downloads and listeners, pressure to fit a strict schedule, pressure to pour more into the production quality and find other ways to get donations or sponsors, pressure to get higher quality and more expensive equipment, and pressure to do more on social media. And what ultimately that led to was, well, a lot of frustration. The reality was that the show wasn't growing like I'd hoped or envisioned that maybe it would. And so in the process of focusing so much on turning this passion into something that made money, I lost touch with why I was doing it in the first place. As I sit here today, I can share that aside from occasional donations that come through, this show does not make me any money. It's not my career, it's not my work. It's simply a hobby that I do on the side of my day-to-day job. And I'll tell you, I think my relationship to this show is maybe the best it's ever been because I can focus on the things that were most important to me in the first place, like creativity, connection, exploration, and building relationships. So I hope these perspectives and stories help bring some insights into thinking about the idea of turning something that you love, a hobby or a passion, into a career. And maybe it leads you to the next question. Should I quit my job? So on the next part of this series, I'll explore that question as I welcome back Coach Gina Murata, who shares some practical tips she uses with her clients to navigate this question, as well as share more of real life stories from real people. I'll see you next time.